of our constituents against predatory lenders, people who lend others money at loan shark rates and often in deceptive language that can be very confusing to consumers until they get the phone call and they're told they owe unaffordable amounts on loans. And states have been working very hard to protect consumers. In fact, 45 states with Republican governors and Democratic governors, Republican attorney generals and Democratic attorney generals, 45 states and the District of Columbia have passed laws to protect their constituents, their consumers, from these loan shark type loans, from these predatory lending practices. But we've seen these predatory lenders find a way around these state efforts to protect their consumers. And the tactic they used has come to be known as rent a bank. And the way it works is that national banks can make loans into any state, even if they're not chartered in that state. And so what's happened is some of these lenders then go to a national bank and essentially just borrow their name, buy the right to their name, and using that mechanism then can make loans into all 50 states in violation of the state law protections against these usurious loans. That's what's happening now. Now, when this whole problem began to emerge, we saw the federal government take action. In fact, the minute the OCC and the FDIC and state governments caught wind of this new trick in the loan shark playbook, they took action. In fact, under President George W. Bush, the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, called these rent-a-bank schemes, quote, an abuse of the national bank charter, unquote. And President Bush's Comptroller of the Currency explained that the OCC was, quote, greatly concerned with arrangements in which national banks essentially rent out their charters, unquote. And that stance and that position was echoed by state legislatures. Again, legislatures from both parties, governors from both parties, who then worked to pass laws, state laws, to limit the amount that people could charge as interest rates on loans. In fact, just last year in the state of Nebraska, voters passed a ballot initiative with more than 70% support to cap interest rates at 36% on consumer loans. That's the same cap we have in my state of Maryland and the same cap that more and more states are adopting across the country. So states are taking measures to protect their constituents, their consumers, against these end runs around their laws designed to prohibit these predatory practices. But last October, in the middle of the pandemic, when many working families were plunged into economic uncertainty and turmoil, former administration, the Trump administration, gave these rent-a-bank schemes a free pass to exploit these loopholes again, to create an end run around those state protections for their consumers. And the last administration, the Trump administration, the OCC unveiled what they called the true lender rule. Well, it's a nice sounding name, an innocent name, but the consequence of that is to unleash the full force of predatory lending on working families. And it reneges on and reverses decades of both state and federal government policy to prevent this end run on usury caps. So what we've seen is predatory lenders move quickly into this space when the Trump administration opened the door to it. One online lender recently told its investors that it was going to get around California's new interest rate cap by making loans through, quote, bank sponsors that are not subject to the same proposed state-level rate limitations, unquote. So what you do is you go to a national bank and you essentially rent their name. And by doing that, you create a loophole that allows you to avoid the state laws that have been put in place to protect against this kind of predatory lending. And we're seeing that now emerge like wildfire around the country. Now, Mr. President, I do want to be clear. There are many innovative fintech partnerships, right? These are lenders who use the internet. There are many who are not exhibiting these kind of predatory behaviors. And we should craft a rule that allows legitimate lending consistent with state laws through those fintech practices. But the way this rule was written during the Trump administration, it opens the door to all the bad actors. It opens the door wide to the predatory lenders to exploit this loophole. And that's why we're on the floor today, because this resolution is designed to stop the predatory lending practices that were unleashed by the OCC rule. It's to shut the door on that Trump administration OCC rule that now has allowed predatory lenders to rush through it. And what we're seeing now are rates of 100%, 200%, whatever they want. I mean, sky's the limit. Some of these interest rates would make loan sharks blush. So we just saw, in fact, one OCC-regulated bank that's been helping a short-term lending company pilot an online rent-a-bank installment loan program that runs at 179% APR. And the OCC rule is being litigated in court right now to defend a $67,000 loan to a restaurant owner at a 268% APR rate that violates the state law where that restaurant is. So this is a perfect example where a small restaurant owner took out a loan, $67,000, deceptively portrayed, only to discover that it was 268% APR. And when the restaurant owner says, wait a minute, I thought the limit in our state was 36%. All of a sudden, they discover that the Trump OCC opened the door to this end run against their state law protections. That's why, Mr. President, we have state attorney generals from red states and blue states, from Nebraska and North Carolina, that have called these rent-a-bank schemes a, quote, sham, and urged us to act. They wrote to us here in the Senate saying, quote, the most efficient course to prevent unrestrained abuse and avert immediate and ongoing consumer harm would be for Congress to invalidate the true lender rule pursuant to its remedial oversight powers under the Congressional Review Act. That's what we will be voting on soon. North Carolina's Attorney General Josh Stein also said in a separate statement, quote, we need every tool at our disposal to uphold state law and stop predatory lenders from coming back into our states. So, Mr. President, I hope that we will act right now to stop what is a rush by many of these predatory lenders to exploit the opening created by the Trump administration's OCC. Then let's take a pause. Let's take time to craft a proper rule that allows legitimate lenders to make loans in ways that do not violate the state protections for the consumers and do not, in the end of the day, wreak havoc with families who get sucked into unsuspecting terms through deceptive practices. So I urge the United States Senate to vote to pass this resolution to protect consumers around the country. And I yield the floor. The Banking Committee, the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee has been working on. We held a number of hearings on this. And I do just want to thank my friend and colleague, the chairman of that committee, Senator Brown from Ohio, who's been a stalwart in protecting consumers. I don't know if he's been to the floor yet, but I just wanted to thank him and other members of the committee for their efforts, and also thank the Biden administration, which just sent down a statement of administration support for overturning the OCC rule and for voting in favor of this resolution. Thank you, and I yield the floor.